Hello viewers, welcome back to the Moose Mobile Auto Repair channel, and today we have a 2010 Toyota Corolla with the 1.8 liter engine, and this has the 5-speed manual transmission, and the customer's complaint is that there is a vibration at highway speeds roughly between 80 and 120, 130 kilometers an hour, between 80 to roughly 130-ish kilometers an hour. So when you accelerate, there's a vibration you can feel a vibration in the steering wheel and the front end of the dash, and probably a little bit of the driver's seat, and the vehicle itself is shaking when you are on wide open throttle on the accelerator. There's a vibration. So this vehicle is a front wheel drive vehicle, and more often than not that if there is a vibration only when you accelerate, it's an issue in the drivetrain, and it's usually bad CV axles that's causing the vibration, and they typically would only happen at higher speeds because axles don't normally spin too fast at slower speeds, so you will only be able to feel the vibration typically at highway speeds and not at lower speeds like driving in the city. Now, I have already inspected this vehicle off camera just now, but we are going to go for a road test first, and I'm going to be doing a little bit of talking. Then I will bring you back over here to inspect the vehicle from underneath. Now, a little bit of history of this vehicle. The original CV axles have been replaced already on both sides at roughly 108,000 kilometers some years ago, because there was a clicking noise when turning left, abrupt left turn from a standstill. So you would hear like a clicking noise. As soon as you turn, you would hear. So that's how you know that the axle is bad, and typically that would mean that there's an issue with the outer CV joint of that axle. So the outer CV joint has ball bearings inside, and the inner CV joint has like a tripod needle bearings inside. So for the outer CV joint, they will normally produce a clicking noise when they go bad, if that part is bad. And for the inboard inner CV joint, also called a plunge joint, because it flexes, it moves up and down, and so the inner CV joint will often either cause a vibration, or it will make a clunking noise, depending on the severity and the damage of the axle. In my experience, I've seen and heard inner CV joint cause a harsh clunking noises from a standstill, either when accelerating or when braking, but it has to be really bad in order to make that noise. And they don't normally make too much of a vibration. They can sometimes, but typically if there's a vibration, it would be the entire drive shaft that's not balanced. But the tripod joint inside the inner CV joint can cause problems and vibration problems too, but it doesn't it's not as common, especially for the clunking for the inner CV joint is not as common, but it's still possible to happen on vehicles. The most common symptom for CV axles is usually people would hear a clicking noise on turns. That's the most common symptom usually, but the CV axles can produce problems in the inboard CV joint as well. So anyhow, I'm not going to get into the deep details at the moment. So we are going to have a look at the vehicle now. So I just wanted to mention again the inner CV joint, also called a plunge joint, because it can move a little bit up and down and in and out. And the outer CV joint usually just turns like this and moves out a little bit, but it can also turn and is flexible. Now, before we start inspecting this vehicle, some information. There will be a little bit of play in CV drive axles on front wheel drive cars and on other cars too, all wheel drive as well, if they have CV axles in the front. So there's always a little bit of tolerance allowed. I'm not really sure if there's a specification. There isn't like an unknown spec for these axles, but a little bit of movement and play is normal because they can handle a tolerance to a certain amount of degrees. And so just because there's some play in it does not mean that it's bad. So I just wanted to let you guys know that. So there's always going to be some amount of play in the axles. So sometimes even during a visual inspection, you may not be able to see that there's an issue, because sometimes it can be an internal problem, like a balance problem with the axles that's causing the vibration. And one last thing I wanted to say is that I forgot to mention that when I replaced the CV axles on this vehicle years ago, I had some problems with a passenger side axle, like a vibration issue, and the vibration would be about roughly would happen at 3200 to 3600 RPM roughly, and outside that range the vibration would go away. And so I tried a couple axles, but I still had the same problem. I used the Track Motive by Track axles. I use two different kinds for the passenger side axle, and it would be roughly the same. The vibration, it would be quite a bit. So I didn't like it, and so I had to return those, and I had to get a different set of axles. At the very end, I ended up getting Cardone axles, and those were a lot better, but still, there was still a little bit of vibration, and so, but it was a lot better than the Track Motive axles. So I just I kept them on the vehicle since then. It's been roughly almost 100,000 kilometers with these Cardone axles, and I've used the Cardone axles and Track-Motive, Track. It's the same company. Track-Motive is by Track. It's a Chinese company. So I've used both Cardone and Track-Motive axles on other vehicles, and I've never had an issue. It was only with this vehicle I had an issue with for the vibration. And we do have another Corolla, a previous generation Corolla that I make videos on. It's a 2005 Corolla. I put Cardone axles on those ones, and I don't have a single vibration issue on that one. Even at highway speeds, there's no vibration. So I believe over the years, these aftermarket companies, they have improvements and design changes over the years, and so they change and they get better, they improve. So they basically these CV axle companies or manufacturers, they try to make theirs better than the OEM axles, because sometimes the original equipment axles have some known problems, and so the aftermarket manufacturers, they try to improve on that to get to make a better design. And so that's what they've tried doing all these years. So I've installed I can't even count on my fingers, but I've installed dozens and dozens and dozens of axles by Trackmotive and Cardone, brand new ones, and I haven't really had too many problems with them. For the most part, 98-99% of the time, I don't have that many issues with them, and I've had good luck using these aftermarket parts with no issues. So I'm just entering the highway now, and as I bring the vehicle up to speed, usually 100 kilometers an hour, this is usually only in higher gears, like in fourth or fifth gear. When I accelerate from about between 90 and 120, when there's a load, when there's a load on the drivetrain, when you hit the accelerator at wide open throttle or even about half throttle, you could feel the vibration. Now I could use this phone as a reference, but I don't know if you guys will be able to see that on camera. You'll see the phone shake like this as I accelerate. Right now, I'm not going exactly fast enough, about 85 or 90 kilometers an hour. So I probably have to wait until the traffic gets less, and then I can show you it on camera afterwards. I'll have to wait until the traffic gets less, and then I will bring you guys back on camera. So we're back again. I'm going to attempt to try to duplicate the issue. So when I hit the gas pedal and you watch my phone, you'll see the phone shake. It's not exactly severe, like it's not exactly absolutely terrible, but it's obvious that the issue is there. Some days are worse, other days a little better, but I've noticed that the drive shaft axles, the CV axles, have gotten worse over the years. These are aftermarket axles, so I haven't had too many problems with aftermarket axles. Just probably I've had probably a few issues over the last maybe close to a couple of decades, so I don't often run into too many problems with aftermarket CV axles. Just a little bit of a vibration issue, but that's about it. You just don't go for the very cheap economy axles or remanufactured axles, because they often have problems. Always get a new one. Always get a new axle. So anyhow, I'm gonna try to attempt to accelerate, and then you watch the phone shake as I try to accelerate. So I don't know if you guys will be able to see that on camera. And so you feel a little bit in the steering wheel, but not all that much. The front end and the dash shakes a lot when you accelerate at wide open throttle in higher gear, usually fourth or fifth gear. Sometimes between like 80 and 120, 130, there's a vibration. So this is a front wheel drive car, so anytime that there's a vibration when you accelerate, and then as soon as you let go, the vibration goes away. So more likely than not, it's a bad CV axle, and you should replace both axles. Don't just replace the one side. Replace both the left and the right side. You don't want to just replace the one side. You want to make sure you replace both sides. So I'm accelerating again. You see the phone shake a bit. We're just using this phone as a reference so you guys can see. So I don't think you guys will be able to pick that up on camera. It's gonna be a little difficult to see that. You probably just have to go based on my words here, because really you can't feel a vibration through the video, unfortunately. So, but that's about it for now. We are gonna go back to the garage and have a look at it from underneath. Have a visual inspection on the axles and the steering and suspension, and just check everything from there. So one last thing I forgot to mention is that on some days it becomes a little bit difficult to accelerate, and I believe that it's the drive shaft axles or CV axles. So I use the words interchangeably, and so some days it's a bit hard to accelerate. But there isn't anything wrong with the vehicle, like engine-wise or transmission-wise. It's just that the axles are vibrating so much. And lately, recently, I ran over a pothole that damaged my one tire in the back. So I don't know if that damaged anything, or if it's a contributing factor. And also I've noticed that sometimes the steering wheel, it pulls the steering, it pulls to the right. So right now I can feel the steering wheel is shaking now as I accelerate. I have to figure out if there's anything loose, steering, suspension on top of that, but that would be a separate issue, because if you have a steering and suspension problem, then the vibration would always be there. It won't go away, regardless if you're accelerating or not accelerating. So just now I feel like the steering wheel is shaking a tiny bit on the highway, but even when I'm not on the accelerator. Now, one word of advice for some of you guys who are inexperienced or just regular do-it-yourselfers. If for any reason that the steering wheel is shaking, that would mean that there's an issue with the front end of the vehicle. Something is wrong with the front end of the vehicle. Whether you're applying the brakes or accelerating or just driving normally, it means there's an issue with something in the front. For any time the steering wheel shakes like this, there's a problem in the front end somewhere. Now, if you feel that the entire vehicle is shaking, usually that would mean there's a problem with the rear end. Something is up, or something is wrong with the rear end of the vehicle, if the vehicle shakes. So depending on what you are diagnosing or looking for, you can just use that as a reference, and that helps to diagnose a lot of steering and suspension, brakes, and driveline issues. So one other thing I wanted to discuss about drive shaft axles, CV axles, is that on the OEM original axles, you'll often see like a rubber piece or a counterweight on either the passenger or the driver's side, or both, depending on the axle. Now on some vehicles, they put it on both the shorter axle and the longer axles. These vehicles have unequal lengths drive shaft axles, and so for the aftermarket drive shaft axles, CV axles, they don't have the counterweights, the rubber piece. I believe they are counterweights to reduce torsional vibration. And so for aftermarket axles, they have stated that the companies have stated that they are internally balanced, so there's no need for an external counterweight on these axles. Although that some aftermarket ones have vibration problems, they are defective, because I've installed a lot of aftermarket axles, and I haven't had too many problems with aftermarket axles. Most of the time they're fine, and they are fine. They last, in my experience, they last just as long or longer than the OEM axles.
On the right to Highway 403, then keep left.
They last just as long or even longer than the OEM axles. Every time I'm replacing an axle, it's always the OEM axle that I'm replacing. It's not an aftermarket axle. 90% or so of the time when I'm replacing an axle on a vehicle, it's always the OEM axle that's going bad, and I'm putting an aftermarket one on them because the OEM axles are extremely expensive. Sometimes it can be $800-900 or so dollars if they are available. Sometimes axles are not available from the dealership or from the OEM manufacturer, so you have to get an aftermarket one. And so people always say a lot of bad things about aftermarket axles, but really I haven't had too many problems with them. Just a few here and there, but it's not very often. And so I usually use Track Motive, Surtrack by Surtrack, or Cardone, the brand new axles. Do not ever use remanufactured axles. I've had problems with remanufactured axles, so make sure you use brand new ones, and don't use the cheapest economy ones, because they're often cheaply made, and the clamps on the boots are really cheap, and so sometimes over time they can break or loosen up, and they can fling grease all around on the vehicle. So don't get the cheapest economy ones. Just get the regular standard axles that are available in the market or at the parts stores, and they often work fine. I haven't had too many problems. Every once in a while I'll have some axles that have like vibration issues at a certain RPM, like 3200 to 3600 RPM, and outside that range it's fine. There's no more vibration, and that's because that they are defective. They were not balanced properly, and usually when you have aftermarket axles and they cause a vibration at those speeds, the axles don't spin fast enough at lower speeds, and so therefore you only feel the vibration at higher speeds or higher RPM, because that's when they're spinning fast enough. And if they are defective, they will produce a vibration so that you're able to feel it. I've had some problems with one of the aftermarket axles, I think on the passenger side, because this axle is longer, and so usually the longer axle will be more prone to having vibration issues if it's not perfectly balanced. The longer axle will usually the longer axle on vehicles with unequal length axles will have problems if it's not balanced properly from the manufacturer. CV axles is because that the OEM original axle went bad. So I've had better luck with aftermarket ones in my personal experience, regardless of what anybody says, because this is my personal experience. And every once in a while, or blue moon, you'll have a defective one, just like anything else. So it doesn't really matter on what it is, really, because sometimes manufacturers, they have defective parts even when new. So I'm underneath the vehicle now. This is the driver's side, and on the driver's side it has the shorter axle. The passenger's side is the longer axle. So these are called unequal lengths CV axles. I'll talk about that shortly later. And so we're just going to inspect this. The vehicle is in neutral now, so I can spin the wheel like this. There's no obvious issues like torn boots or anything, so we can just grab this and try to push up and down. It only moves a tiny bit, so that's normal. You can push it in and out. So a little bit of play is normal here. This is the inboard CV joint, or inner CV joint. And then we're going to have a look at the outer CV joint. This one is going to move a little bit in and out like this. And that's normal. There's always going to be a little bit of play in there and noise, so that's normal. Then you go up and down. Now, the outer CV joint should not be able to go up and down much. Just maybe, if anything, a very tiny fraction. Just a tiny fraction going up and down. Shouldn't go up and down much. These only move in and out, and that's it. You can turn the wheel if you want and have a look at it and see if there's any noises, abnormal noises. Sometimes, in some circumstances, if the lubrication dries up inside, even that the boot is not torn, it's possible that the lubrication can dry up over time and the ball bearings can seize up a little bit or bind up, and that can cause issues with trying to turn the wheel back and forth. And in very rare circumstances, it can cause like a pulling problem. It can pull to one side if something is seized up. So that's also possible. So I'm just inspecting this vehicle as I'm going along, just showing you guys on what to look for. So I've already inspected the steering and suspension off camera. Control arms, control arm bushings the lower ball joints, the outer tie rod, inner tie rod, stabilizer links, stabilizer bar bushings, and so on. I've already inspected these things. I don't really see anything loose or broken here, so everything seems to be okay on this side. Now we are going to go to the passenger side. So we are looking at the inner CV joint now on the passenger side. So it's the same inspection. Go up and down. It moves a little bit. This goes in and out. I believe that's normal. That should be okay, because that's just a little bit of play going in and out. So just spinning this and going up and down. This is just the axle that's moving around slightly inside the transmission, and then I'm just going to push in and out like this, and that's normal. This is normal. I'll see if I can show you guys here at this point of view. So I'm gonna go up and down. This moves a little bit, but it's not too much. And this in and out. And then up and down. So this is normal. A little bit of play is okay on this. So we are going to check the outer CV joint now for the passenger side. So the outer CV joint, in and out, up and down. There's no play there really, up and down like this. So it seems like these axles are okay, just that there's a vibration problem, and I believe it's just that the axle internally hasn't been balanced properly, and some of the OEM axles will have like a rubber vibration damper to reduce torsional vibration. It's like a counterweight, but these aftermarket axle manufacturers don't use them because they have stated that these axles are internally balanced already, so there's no need for a vibration damper. The OEM manufacturer, they use them just because they do, just for reduction of vibration, to reduce vibration. I really don't know as to why the OEM manufacturers use the rubber counterweights and the aftermarket does not. I can't really answer that, but from what I know, aftermarket axles, they don't normally have a rubber counterweight on them, so that's why you won't see them here. But it does not mean that it's not balanced. It's just that it's been internally balanced, and so there is no need for them. But anyhow, I don't know if we are going to be replacing these axles soon, because usually when I accelerate on the highway, but like somewhere around the 100 km/h mark, fifth gear usually, I'm having a difficulty accelerating sometimes, so we may change these axles out probably later on at some point, and I will make a video on that. So that's it for this part at the front end. I'm going to check the rear end of the vehicle now, just to check the wheel bearings and see if there's any problems. I've been doing a lot of driving and stuff, and so I recently ran over a pothole. I have a video on that, talking about it briefly. I still have to make a follow-up video on that one, but I haven't had the chance to do that yet. And so now I'm just going to check the the rear end and then just go from there. I noticed that this vehicle, the steering wheel, sometimes it wants to go like this to the right and pull slightly to the right. So I don't know if the alignment is slightly out. So I might have that addressed at some point and just go from there. So that's going to be it for this one. I already inspected the rear suspension. Everything seems to be okay for the most part, except there's probably a very minor noise in the hub assemblies for the rear wheel bearings on both sides. These wheel bearings have already been replaced some time ago, about roughly I think at 160,000 or so. This vehicle is roughly 200,000 kilometers now. Aftermarket Moog hub assemblies in the rear on both sides, but it's not really making that much noise. It's probably a tiny bit. It's not really a big concern at the moment until the problem gets worse, but everything else seems to be okay. I didn't see any play in the wheel bearings or anything broken. The bushings for the rear suspension, the solid beam axle, just a little bit of cracking in the bushing, and it's not to a point where it needs replacement yet. So I'm just going to wait until it becomes a big concern, or just when it's about to be needing a replacement. Overall, these vehicles are pretty much bulletproof. They do need some repairs from time to time, but really these cars, they just keep going usually and don't need too much maintenance and repairs, just here and there every now and then. The vehicle is daily driven, so it's gonna be needing some things every now and then. That's it for today. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please don't forget to give it a like, and please consider subscribing to my channel if you're not already a subscriber, and please don't forget to hit that bell notification if you haven't done so. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good day and take care.